This video focuses on one of the mandatory Supreme Court cases you need to know this year. And this is the most recent of the bunch. This is Citizens United versus FEC, which was from 2010. So this is the third mandatory case we've reviewed this year. It's not a perfect fit with the executive branch stuff we're using, but it's pretty close because we've been talking a lot about presidential elections. So if you take a look at the chart, right, you should be able to see the obvious trend. This chart shows the total amount of money being spent on presidential elections by like the candidates. And you can just see that the money being spent on elections is exploding. And you could argue that this is not a great thing. That number one, there's better things to spend money on. But this is going to reduce the political impact of people that don't really have money to be able to spend. So this case is going to focus on campaign finance reform and all of these commercials and things that you see during like the run up to elections in this country. So the first thing you need to know is campaign finance reform is what we call the attempt to reduce the influence of money in elections. So if you are bothered by that chart and you see how much money people are spending to get elected, then you would support campaign finance reform, which tries to reduce the impact of money getting people elected. There aren't a whole lot of laws that have been passed by Congress to establish meaningful campaign finance reform. No surprise, right? The people that pass these laws, right, are the ones that are benefiting from the lack of like regulation of money in politics. So you can understand why these people aren't very quick to pass laws, because this is a major advantage that they have. But there are a couple laws that have been passed that it's important to note for background knowledge so you understand the significance of the case. In 1972, one of the first major pieces of campaign finance reform legislation is passed, and it's called the 1972 Federal Election Campaign Act, otherwise known as FECA. And it creates the FEC, which is a government organization that's still around today, called the Federal Election Commission, whose job is basically to keep track of all things related to money in politics. So they're the ones that enforce the rules and regulations. So this is the point at which we start tracking who's donating to which candidates, how much candidates are spending. That didn't really exist much prior to this law. It also limits how much an individual can give to a particular politician, like a regular citizen. So the numbers differed back in 1972, but it's been adjusted as we've gone through history since. And that number right now is $2,900. So you can't give more than $2,900 to your favorite politician in a 2-year time period. So this idea that people are writing $1 million checks and giving it directly to their candidate is not necessarily happening. So again, right, this law is the first piece of campaign finance reform legislation that's passed in this country. All right, second law, like 30 years later, is 2002. The Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act is passed. It's also known as the McCain-Feingold Act because the two senators that wrote the law, John McCain on the left, a Republican senator from Arizona, and Russ Feingold, a Democratic senator from Wisconsin, they came together and they authored this law. So this law did a couple things. The first thing that it did is it closed the loophole for what's called soft money donations. There were certain individuals that were frustrated that they were limited by the first law we talked about in how much they could give to their favorite candidate. So ultimately what they decided to do was they gave unlimited amounts to their favorite political party, and then the political party funneled the extra money to their candidates. That's what we call soft money donations. If you give a donation directly to a candidate, that's called a hard money donation, and that was limited by the initial law that we talked about, the Federal Election Campaign Act, right? So it's human nature. You find the loophole around the law. You give unlimited amounts to the party, and then the party gives the money to the candidate. So the McCain-Feingold Act, the first thing it does is it closes that loophole. The second thing that it does is much more significant for the court case that we're looking at. It also limits the ability of outside groups. So what do we mean by outside groups? We're talking about like not the political parties and not the actual candidates running for office. It placed limits on how much they could spend on election media, like commercials, even if they're not really associated with the candidates. And it basically establishes a 30-day limit that if you're an outside group, you're not one of the political parties, and you're not the actual candidate's campaign, it limits your ability to spend money on commercials within like a month, 30 days of an actual election. So this is where the dispute comes in. Citizens United is a conservative group, right? They're pro-Republican, and it's 2008. The two Democrats that are running for the Democratic nomination are Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. The Republican candidate was going to be John McCain, who ironically is who the law was named after. So conservatives felt like Hillary Clinton probably had more experience, and she was going to be more difficult for the Republican candidate to beat in the 2008 general election. They thought that Obama would be an easier election win. Obviously, that didn't turn out the way they had expected. So this conservative group, Citizens United, begins a campaign basically to make Hillary Clinton look bad, so that maybe that helps Obama get the Democratic nomination, and then the Republican can more easily win in the 2008 general election. So they basically put together a documentary called Hillary the Movie, and it's going to air on Netflix. And basically, it's a documentary that just makes Hillary Clinton look really, really bad. And it's meant to actually help Obama get the nomination. The problem is that law, the McCain-Feingold Act, prevents them from advertising for this documentary in the run-up to the 2008 Democratic primary. So they're not actually allowed to put commercials on telling people to go find this documentary because it's considered to be election media, and that's banned by the McCain-Feingold Act within 30 days of an election because they're classified as an outside group. So they sue. And the issue is, can Congress actually limit the amount of money that private organizations like Citizens United can spend on their own political ads? Citizens United argues that this is a First Amendment issue. It involves free speech. Congress is passing laws that regulate their ability to speak politically. Right? It's not like verbal speech like what I'm doing right now, but they look at their ability to run election commercials as their free speech, politically. So they believe that Congress is interfering with this free speech and they should be able to do it, and that the McCain-Feingold law is unconstitutional. And the Supreme Court agrees. Strictly along party lines, 5-4, the 5 conservative justices side with Citizens United and the 4 liberal justices dissent. And basically that this takes away the limitations on these outside groups to spend. So here's the overall significance of the ruling. The overall significance of the ruling is these outside groups are now defined as what we call super PACs. A super PAC is a political group that does not actually have any kind of coordination with the candidates or the parties that are running for office. So now we call, because of this Supreme Court decision, these outside groups as super PACs. You actually have to register with the Federal Election Commission, fill out paperwork, and if your group is a super PAC, you basically can now spend unlimited amounts on ads, right? You can put as many ads on TV as you want. There's no limit on how much you can spend, as long as you don't directly coordinate with the candidate. You can't call up the candidate and say, how would you like to be portrayed in these ads? You have to maintain independence. So that's the hitch, is if you're a super PAC, you can't actually donate directly to the candidate, and you can't coordinate with the candidate. You have to be independent of them in your spending. Donations to super PACs are anonymous. If you donate directly to a candidate, the FEC basically keeps track of your donation. You're limited. You can't spend more than $2,900, and it's all a matter of public record, right? You could log on to the FEC's website, and you can see how much individuals donated to candidates, right? What their name is, where they're from, how much they donated. But if you donate to a super PAC, it's anonymous. And if you donate to a super PAC, there is no limit in how much you can donate. So basically what this has done is create a situation where these super PACs have become basically run by wealthy interests to influence election results, right? And you can see how much these super PACs are now spending. Look at the total amount of outside spending in all of these elections, and you can see that every election, right, since the Supreme Court ruling in 2010 has had more and more of these super PACs basically spending to influence elections, which is frustrating because you as an individual can't give more than $2,900 to your favorite politician. And let's be honest, most Americans can't afford to spend more than $2,900. They're spending like $25 they're donating to a candidate, or $100 they're donating to a candidate. Though these super PACs can't coordinate with the candidates know the super PACs are out there spending these outrageous sums of money, and the super PACs aren't doing it just to be nice. They obviously want this candidate to get elected because they feel like the candidate's going to do something for them in the long term. These super PACs now have so much more influence over the candidates than just the regular $25, $100 donations that regular individuals are giving. It also explains why if you hang through these campaign commercials, by law, they're required to now tell you where these ads come from. So these are 2 ads from Biden from the 2020 election, just the ends of them.
We all love this country and go from there.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
So it tells you at the end of the ad that this was an ad that came right from Joe Biden's campaign. Joe Biden approved this message. So this is an ad that the candidate can run based on all the donations that regular people basically sent to the campaign. However, most of the commercials now are ending something like this.
At all.
Priorities USA Action is responsible for the content of this ad.
Priorities USA Action is responsible for the contents of the ad. That's a super PAC, right? That's this outside organization that can't coordinate directly with Biden, that wants Biden to win, wants Trump to lose. We don't know really who's donating to the super PAC, and that's where the commercial's coming from. So these organizations are running so many more commercials. If you pay attention, there's a lot more of these types of commercials. And again, now you know where they're coming from. They're coming from super PACs that are created by this Citizens United versus FEC decision.